let me ask you now, given the economic climate, would you welcome that money back with the demands?
Well,
Or would you never go back to
museums, even publicly funded museums, must work closely with individuals and foundations and corporations to accomplish our mission.
Yeah.
So
but they went too far with her, didn't they?
I never saw the fine print and agreement, but it's just from what I read in the paper, it seemed like it was not going to be a good partnership.
Yeah.
I like to think that I could have made some difference in working out some compromise or starting over, because I do think that there were some good intentions there, but it just went in the wrong direction. But I do think that we have to work closely with the private sector. The Smithsonian is not capable of fulfilling its mission without working with
the arrangement with Ralph Lauren completely different, or is it hands off?
Yes. I think what Polo Ralph Lauren really was interested in the conservation of the flag. They never were suggesting anything as far as interpretation of or the content or what objects we would show. They really wanted to know that we were going to do something that was as excellent as possible, the highest quality.
Right.
And we had to, that took more time.
Did Ralph himself get involved, Ralph Lauren?
I think to a certain extent at the beginning. I think his son David had showed a real interest all the way along, and he was at the dedication of our flag gallery 2 weeks ago. And there were other key leaders in the company who were very interested, and also from the Ralph Lauren Foundation. So they took an active interest, but in my way of thinking, a very positive interest.
I mean, what do museums do that are dependent on federal dollars when the federal government is apparently going to be busy bailing out everybody else?
Yeah.
And I would imagine museums don't get a very good place in line when the banks and the auto companies are failing.
Yeah.
You know, what do you do? And what relationship do you need to have with donors that makes it worth their while, but not compromise you?
Right.
How do you do that?
Well, I think it helps, and I don't want to sound too bureaucratic, but I think it helps to have a plan. And we do have a master plan for the museum. So we have something that we can show people of the direction we want, in which we want to go. And then try to find like-minded partners who understand what our plan is, what we're trying to achieve, and where they can help. And there are many people who want to be asked. This is the National Museum of American History. It's the Smithsonian.
Still have some money in their pockets?
Well, you know, whether they have money now or they want to plan for the future or they want to, I like to say we're in the forever business at the Smithsonian, and we are one of the enduring institutions. As long as there's a United States of America, I think there will be a Smithsonian. So I think that sense of permanence still attracts people. Now, what other museums do is a real challenge, because they have their constituencies in their cities and towns, and during times like this it is very challenging, but I think it's helpful to have a master plan, to have some vision of where you want to go.
Could you foresee the Smithsonian Museum starting to charge admission?
I really can't. I know that comes up periodically.
Well, you know, these times, you know, who knows where this economy is.
There's a cost to charging admission, and I don't think we would have, I don't think it's been proven that we would derive that much revenue. Even the best museums in the world bring in terms of their overall operating budget, very little of that is from admission fees. If you look at Colonial Williamsburg or any of the museums that Mount Vernon that charge admission, a very small percentage, I'd say less than 20% of their revenue comes from admission. So there's I think a false assumption that if you charge admission, everything would just would even out.
Do you think that the museum overreached by putting a $20 admission fee? Having an admission fee. I mean,
I don't know enough about their actual operating budget right now
well, we know they had to cut back their staff by what, 10%, I think, is what was reported.
I think if you invite Charles Oversby to come here and he can answer the question,
that none of that was true.
I'm sure they. I know they had a very strong.
You don't want to talk about the museum.
Right. I want to talk about the American History Museum.
You just want to gloat.
Right. No, I mean we have real challenges. I mean, and we're not, when you say the museum isn't fully open, someone could spend 5 to 6 or 7 hours in our museum and still not finish seeing everything that is open.
But,
so.
and the $85 million that it costs.
Yes.
Is that for the whole project? So
that's for this current project, yes.
But when everything is finally open, it's not that you still need more money to finish the project.
Well, this phase of the project was the center of the museum, and that involved the architectural changes that really open up and bring more light into the museum, and just remove the interior walls and really make the museum more welcoming.
So you spent the $85 million?
Yes.
Could you have got that money today if you needed it?
I think it would be, it's a more competitive environment. About half of that money is federal.
Right.
That's about $46 million, and the other $40 million is
so there's
private.
Probably a little bit of, God, we
well,
get that done in
yeah, I think it was, in addition to that $85 million, we also raised some money to reinstall some of our exhibits, and those are paid for. We have a little debt at the end of this, but I think once we're open, now that we're open and we have some revenue coming in from gift shops and restaurants operations, we will make up that shortfall. And if you want to pass a hat around at the end.
Well, you know, I mean, the museums, I wasn't kidding. I mean, I was sort of making light of it, but when you see what Congress is having to deal with, you walk in hat in hand now, I just don't think anybody's going to listen to you, are they?
Well, I think museums contribute.
I mean, it's not that they don't know you're important.
Yeah.
It's just that you're not on fire.
Right. Right. I think they respond to crises. I know I was in one congressional office once, and we were talking about the needs of the museum, and the staff person there said, I don't hear anybody complaining about the Smithsonian. So it's almost until there's a complaint or until there's a problem, there's not a response. And we do a very good job of not covering up our problems, but putting on a really good show 364 days a year where we're open.
Were you hurt by the New York Times review?
No, no. I mean the one that sort of criticized.
The one that said that criticized you, that felt
because
that you fallen short of the goals.
Yeah, we never had the review pointed out, I think correctly, the architectural transformation, and was quite, I think,
right. So there are many good things, but I mean you probably don't want me to read this.
No, that's okay.
But it says. The new corridor leading to the Star-Spangled Banner, for example, gives the flag's historical context, but it is painfully cursory, while the corridor leading away from it refers to its symbolic importance with little more than video images. This featured exhibition space relies more on sensation than explanation and exploration. Yeah. And then they said that they felt, on the whole, that it was out of focus. But my question really is, it's like the New York Times wants some kind of profound gravitas. And I wonder if your constituency wants that too.
I think it's a good question, because if the writer had come into the museum when there really are people there and see how people experience the museum and paid attention to audience, which we have to do. Right. People cannot go into a history exhibit and read label text that goes on and on and on about who was Francis Scott Key and what was his legal career and all the depth that I think he was asking for. Well, and people, we don't put a book on the wall. That's a museum experience is really a visual experience, and it is sensory, visual and audio, and it's also a social experience. And a lot of the learning that goes on in a museum is when friends go together, or when you go with your class or with your family. And if you ever watch people in a museum, especially a history museum, you see people pointing out an object and telling each other something about it. Sometimes it's wrong, but that's okay.
You got them in the tent.
I once was there was a family standing in front of the Smithsonian Castle, and there's a statue of Joseph Henry there, who was the first secretary of the Smithsonian, and the father was saying to the family, "That's James Smith, the founder of the Smithsonian." Well, it was James Smithson, first of all, who was the founder, and it wasn't even James Smithson, a statue of James Smithson, but I let it go. I didn't want to